listeners. This is your host Farva with a brand new episode of the podcast Heritage Trails. In this episode, we have invited a very special guest. Marlene is an earthen architect from Portugal, and today we are sitting in this beautiful beach town called Paris. It's a town near Lisbon. In today's episode, we will be talking about earthen architecture, a form of architecture that could possibly be the solution to our sustainable development problems. But what are its limitations and how does this form exist in today's world? Let's talk to our guest Marlene about the ins and outs of earthen architecture. But before we get into it all, Marlene, how did you decide you wanted to be an earthen architect?
Architecture for me in general has been quite a journey. During my course, I did it because I had to. I wanted to quit several times. I was just, okay, this is not, I don't feel engaged, I don't feel in love, I don't anything. Because in architecture school, it's just, the white box, the white cube, and modern architecture, and we have to do things in a certain way. So for many years I thought even that I didn't want to do architecture. The way I found out about earthen architecture was during a project, a restoration project, and it was a big coincidence. I wasn't expecting. It started just by restoring a house and working with the materials of the house, the plasters and all, and that was the first time that I even knew we could plaster a wall with clay. And after that, I've met a person that had a huge impact on my knowledge, and this master, he told me about everything I needed to know, and I started exploring, and it started to become something really important because it's such a huge field that you have to study a lot, and not having any previous background, it has been really about studying it and understanding. But the beginning was a huge coincidence, huge.
I think I heard it somewhere or read it somewhere that we come from the earth and to earth we shall return.
Yes.
And so for many years in human history, everything, human started experimenting with the earth, and everything was coming from the earth. But then what happened? Like the architecture that we see today, what happened?
So from dust to dust, right? From ashes to ashes, from dust to dust. Earthen architecture, it's what's closest to our to the beginning of our dwellings. We started in the caves where we discovered, the fire and the narratives and the stories, and that allow us to dream and to aim for other things. The first forms of construction were with earth, with clay. And that is so close to our origin as human beings, to our structure, that it's something that needs to be reminded permanently, because it's really connected with the beginning of our times. And it has had a huge importance through millennia. Like the first cities that were discovered date from 10,000 BC. So this is huge in terms of our history and the importance. And the thing is that almost half of the world population still lives in earthen buildings. But we have to deal with something of the modernity, that is the materials, the different materials, and the aim for different ways of living, because in the end we are never happy with the way we are living. So what modernity brought was new ways of construction, new materials that were very valuable, of course, for example, structures. So concrete, it's a magnificent material. But, for bridges and steel also, for structures. But for housing, it lacks all the sensitive that we need. All that, because earth it's a living material, and it's an organic material, as we are. So there's this symbiotic relationship between ourselves and a material that it's natural. And with concrete, for example, you don't feel that. It's just like...
That's completely true. And you mentioned housing, but and you said like half of the population still lives in the earthen architecture built houses. But if I think about it, when I think about houses made of mud, I think about underdeveloped countries or third world countries. I don't see that in the first world countries. So why is it that the houses made of mud are associated with poverty or people who are not making enough?
Yeah, well, first of all, like the health of living, it's not just living, it's also contacting. So it can also be in the form of religious buildings. There's a lot of mosques. The first mosques, for example, were built with earth. And that was the available material. It was right there, almost all over the world. It's present in almost every continent. And it's such an easy-to-use material that everyone could use it. You didn't need to go to a city to buy the material. You had it like that, right there. And the most important thing is that people could build their own houses. And you didn't need specialized work. Through the knowledge transmitted with experience, everyone could build their own house. So you have, like, in Africa, for example, all the traditional tribes built with mud, and it's part of their tradition. You have it in the Middle East, you have it in all places that needed to have a quick response to all the dwelling necessities. It's now, well, you have the Egyptians built with mud, and those guys knew their pretty things and their fancy things. So if they used it, we now associate it with poor communities, with a poor lifestyle, and that's a huge misconception. And it's just a reflection of our time, because there was this need of replacing the mud houses with concrete. And so now what is left, it's the examples that are still, in underdeveloped countries. But it's a misconception. And for example, like I said, the Egyptians, they knew their stuff. And even nowadays, you have in Germany, you have it, but it's different techniques, because it also depends on the weather and the available materials. But you have a lot of earth construction in Germany, in the UK, here in Portugal. It's used as an infill. So you have a structure that might be in wood, for example. It's mainly in wood, and then it has earth inside. So you still have all the positive aspects of the material.
The stonewalling technique that is also, I think, more common in the Baltic region, is also would be considered as earthen.
Yes. So they are still, but they are not, even here, for example, you have a lot of examples, but then they are plastered with lime or other materials that makes them, visually, they are not mud. And this visual aspect, it's very important, especially nowadays, where it's like the most important things. Houses have to and when I say houses, I say it, we're talking about buildings, not just houses. They have to look a certain way. So actually, in developed countries, there are a lot of examples, but they are concealed. They are not as exposed, but that's also because of the weather conditions, for example, because in Africa or in the Middle East, the weather is so different than from here, that we need to have it in terms of rain and wind and humidity. We have other restrictions here, so it's normal that. But overall, yes, it's very much associated to underdeveloped countries and to a poor lifestyle. And that's a terrible thing to fight against.
That's quite unfortunate, actually. Did you have a chance to travel to places where there are dwellings made of art?
Yes. I think the biggest example was in Iran. Yes,
That's surprising.
Yes, you have some of the oldest examples that are preserved that in an amazing way. And I was lucky enough to do this, let's say, workshop for restoration of Earthen Architecture in the city of Yazd. And it's a city that it's all made of earth. It's and it's amazing, and it's so well preserved, and everything. The streets are made of clay, and the houses are made of adobe, and everything. And it just has this atmosphere that it's unique, and you feel it's completely different. Even the quality of the air, not even. Of course, visually it's amazing, but you really feel it. You really feel that you're in something that it's living and it's breathing and it's responding to the outside temperature, and it's adapting and it's providing you with the best possible quality of life. Because with Earth, it happens. It's like it's working with you to make your life better.
Yeah, I remember reading about historical places in India and Pakistan, and how those mud houses, they provided a natural wind, and they naturally provided cold atmosphere, especially because these countries tend to get really hot in the summer. So the mud would keep the inside of the house really nice and cold.
And yes, it responds to the outside temperature. So if it's, for example, when you have a desert climate where it's really hot during the day, inside it will be really cold, or it will be in a comfortable way, because during the nights it gets really chilly. So the earth will retain all the cold that it received during the night, and it will slowly release it during the day. So it's very balanced in terms of temperature, in terms of humidity. No other material has such a positive response in terms of humidity as earth does. It's really it's a healthy material, and we got so used to not care about that, because we don't even think. No one thinks these days, what am I breathing? We spend most of our life indoors. And you don't think about it. What are these walls made of?
Poisonous materials. We keep ourselves closed inside, and the paints that we're using, everything is
completely toxic.
Yeah.
So then you have
especially in the Corona times, when you have to stay inside most of the time, you need that connection with the nature. And now we're closed in concrete walls.
Exactly. And that's very worrying. Like you said, especially now when we are forced to stay indoors, that should be a priority, to understand the quality of the places we are living in. And that is something that it needs to be addressed, because it has a direct influence in our health.
And the quality of life that we have. Also, how do you think it would be possible to bring this form back, but also because of the modern times that we live in, how do we have this relationship where we have to struggle to bring something from the ancient history back, which is not so ancient, but bring it back, but also go with the regulations of these days?
Well, the regulation aspect, it's very important, but it changes from country to country. For example, in India, in terms of regulation, because there they also have a very strong tradition. I was also lucky enough to be there and to study there and to witness the importance they give to Earthen Architecture. There, the regulation, for example, it's easier to follow. But it really depends from country to country, and it's being worked on. In Europe, for example, it's being worked. In terms of earthquakes, it's very important, earthquake resistance. So that part, it's being taken care of. The difficult, it's the mentality, how bring this to the people. And like you said, it's something that it's ancient, so how do we make it now? How do we make it suitable for our nowadays aesthetics and demands? And we are dealing with many different things here. I think first of all, it's in terms of memory, because when we talk about this material, that it's connected with our ancestrality, we are talking about memory, and it's the memory that is within us, and we have to make it, come back to surface again. Personally, I believe the way to do so is through narrative, by explaining to people where this material came from and what was built with it and the importance, and make that appeal to the senses and to that almost sleeping memory that we have of something that it's very old but it's within us. That's something. And then the visual aspect, of course. We don't have to live in mud huts, There are amazing pieces of architecture being made with this. This is a material, and of course with every material it responds a certain way and it has to be designed in a certain way. So it's also about doing conscious architecture, architecture that responds to the climate, that responds to the people, that responds to the senses. And because this material is so tactile and so responsive to everything, it's a big opportunity for architects to also think about the type of work that they do. Because it has to be designed in a way that it respects the climate, and you use the sun and you use everything in a positive way.
Is this material also neglected over concrete? Because in some ways people have this assumption that it's hard to work with, do you think?
Yes, there's a lot of misconceptions. Also, it's not as profitable.
Yeah, the industries will.
Yeah,
you don't have to.
Concrete you buy in a bag.
Yeah.
I mean, you buy the cement and you make the concrete. Earth, the idea, it's the dug out earth you have from a plot, from a site. The idea is to use that earth to study, to see what it needs to make it stable, to make it usable, but it's not an industry that you feed.
If you make this idea more common, they will find a way to make it profitable.
Yeah,
also.
Of course, they would put a brand on it.
Water in a bottle and sell it back to you. So I think
yes, of course.
Capitalism.
Yeah, of course. And there are brands that have products, and you still need to buy products. There you need, if you have a soil that it's not as rich in clay, it's more sandy or something, you need to get more clay, for example, and then that in Europe, for example, you buy with the brand on it and everything. Yeah. But overall it's not as profitable, and it needs specialized craftsmanship, and it's lacking. Also, it has restrictions in terms of what can be built. In terms of high-rise buildings, for example, there are restrictions. But again, it depends on the technique. In Yemen, you have skyscrapers that are 9 stories high, but it's different. It's in the desert, so they can build with a mixture of adobe, and it's different. Here again, it would have to be with a wooden structure, and then use earth as an infill. But concrete, it's like
modern atrocity.
It has its space.
Yeah, definitely.
It has its space, and it's really important for certain structures, but not the ones that speak directly to our senses. And
I grew up in the biggest city in Pakistan. Mm-hmm. It's a concrete jungle, and I don't feel happy there because of how those buildings are just like. You're just covered everywhere, surrounded by concrete, and you don't feel like you can breathe it. over there. Like you go to the nearest town, like the smallest village, and you just feel happy because it's all nature and there's just like small mud houses, but there's a little cleaner air, fresher atmosphere, and you start feeling calm.
Yes, exactly. That's the thing with
we
nature.
We have built these huge cities made of concrete, but we haven't thought about how it will go in the future and what the future of these buildings is going to be, because we build these ugly concrete buildings, but they're going to be there forever.
The concrete has a very small lifespan, and it's not a renewable material. So you just see these ruins and they begin to rotten, and it's very, like you said, it's so heavy and depressing, and you don't feel happy at all. And it's not easy to restore. For example, wood or earth, even stone, you can work with the material. With concrete, it's one-way road. But like you said, you refer to the city, and that's also urban development. It's such a big issue, and it's something that we need to give a response. And again, for that response, there are certain materials that provide an easier, faster solution. How can this be transported for a city? That's a very difficult issue, because again, there are restrictions.
Yeah, definitely.
It's not like a city as we know them, developed cities with high buildings. That cannot be made with earth.
And that cannot be very quickly done either.
Yeah. But earth cannot respond to that. Like I said, it's possible to do a structure with wood and then fill it, make infills with earth, but it's an utopia to think that we'll have modern cities made of that. But it's all about balance, as it is with all the matters that we are facing now in terms of the environment, in terms of the recycling, in terms of everything. We know that not everyone is going to, stop using plastic and everything, but we have to balance. So cities are a big question, but if we can balance other environments, maybe we can, it can make some sort of difference.
We can adapt a little bit, we can find some balance.
Yes, and also it's like, I don't care about cities. It's not about that, but it's a huge question, and it's a huge thing to think about. What can we do in cities? Even if we have these concrete buildings, even if you plaster a wall with clay in a concrete building, it makes a difference. It makes a difference in terms of the quality. But materials have to change. Materials have to change, and to give that sense, like you said, of nature. And
if we even look at the value that it provides, like if you look at the World Heritage Sites that are on the UNESCO World Heritage list, a lot of those sites are made of earthen architecture, and those are valued more because they have survived through ages and they're still standing.
Yes.
However, in a bad condition they are, but they're still standing.
Yes. Yeah, you have... like, for example, for earthquakes and all, they are very resistant. In Iran, the city of Bam, it got destroyed, but that was a huge earthquake. They really resist over time. And it's like you said, those are World Heritage Sites. So they are important, even though they're made of mud. And for me, like we talked, they speak to such ancient things within us, within ourselves as human beings, that it's so important to not lose them. Because, it's not even, they were the first dwellings, they provided the first shelter after the caves. But even as kids, we all played with mud. You know,
Everyone loves it.
Every kid. I don't think
There's just something about playing with the earth, playing with mud and clay.
Yes, and everyone did that as a kid, getting your hands dirty, and so that speaks to us in such a way that it needs to be, taken back to discussion. It's a huge thing, but there are so many things to deal with, so many aspects to have in consideration. So it's.
And how many people are working on this around this field in the world?
I don't know numbers, but it's not that many. It's easy to get a sense of the community again, because it's so it's so small.
And I can imagine, like, the craftsmen you also mentioned, the skilled craftsmen, there aren't too many left either.
No.
So the skill is not being transferred in the next generation.
No. For example, in India, I was at the UNESCO School for Earthen Architecture. They have also, it's an amazing place, and they've been working in terms of the legislation, in terms of the machines, because you can, like brick, for example, brick construction, it's something spread worldwide. It's almost there, it's almost perfect, except that they bake the brick in terms of overall brick construction. So you actually have the good material, you have the mud brick, and then you kill it. Okay, but for example, with mud bricks, the raw mud bricks, it's exactly the same thing. You have a brick, and you can build in the same way without killing the poor thing. So, for example, in the school in India, they developed machines that allow you to build these earth blocks in a very fast way, that give a quick response, and you can build a house like in a matter of days with this technology.
Why do people not know about this?
Like you said, why are they in India? If they were in Europe, it would be different, right? Yeah.
Everyone would know about it. It would be like the fancy thing to do. The next fancy thing to do.
Yeah. But even in India, which is a huge country where the tradition of earthen construction it's present in several areas. For everyone who wants to build it earth, they go to this place in the south to get the needed training to do so. So even in a country where this tradition it's very much alive, there's like one big place to get the training. In Iran, for example, it's something that passes almost, from experience, direct experience. So this is how you do it. Look at me doing it. Now do it yourself. So it's complicated. In other places, it's so specialized, but it's happening with almost every craftsmanship, with every art that it's based on tradition. It's getting lost in so many fields, and there's this lack of interest overall for keeping them, and I don't know how to change that, because you have that in so many fields.
Yeah, true.
So how to deal with that?
That is the question.
Yeah, it's. I mean, I don't have an answer. I think it's fine not to have an answer, because we need to ask the questions in order to get to the root of the problems. But how to make tradition something valuable that young people want to continue them.
But it's also, I think, important for people to know about it, and also know that this exists. Because a lot of people don't know about it. Like, they grow up in the modern times, and that's all they know. They don't even try to know about what was there before.
Yes. Yeah, that's the thing. Like, with heritage preservation and all. It's all very nice, and so many programs and it's challenging. But the thing is, you can only preserve what you know. So we are assuming that this knowledge about the things that we are seeing, it's there, and you can call it culture or but it's something that you cannot expect people to understand. And we cannot, like, it's almost like an elite in the end, the people who work with heritage and conservation, because we study and we know things. But that, in the end, that doesn't matter, because it's a minority. So we cannot expect the people who live in the city that has all the monuments, we cannot expect them to understand the meaning of that. But we have to tell them in a way that it's not, lecturing.
Yeah.
How don't this is so important, so respect it. So that it's also an important question. Because otherwise people won't understand what they have, and of course conservation and preservation starts with local communities. It's not with the experts that go there testing things. So how can they be preserved in a daily basis?
It's such a beautiful relationship of human and earth and nature. I hope, because of you, I got to know about it. I hope now through this podcast, people will get to know about it also.
Yes.
That is my hope.
Hopefully, yes.
And thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.